What's up, Degenerate Nation? Welcome to Big Bets on Campus podcast. This is the Week 0 college football betting preview. I'm Stuckey, and joining me, as always, is Colin Wilson. They're here. Are you finally ready to talk games, brother?
We before we hit record here on Thursday, the board's been lighting up like a Christmas tree. It's like a dopamine that gets in my veins and like makes me feel like it's Christmas Day, because I'm so excited that we have an active board. You and I have had to live through this realignment talk for 2 months. We've had lines that have just been sitting stable for 3 months. It's here. We're gambling. Football's back. There's kids in Ireland. There's kids in El Paso. I couldn't be more excited.
Yep. Yeah. As much as people who pretend to be sharp on Twitter want to tell you that the market is settled months ago or throughout the summer, a lot of the big money comes out this week when they're allowed to bet real dollars. So you'll start to see some real moves, which we have today. And I'm sure that there'll be more as we lead up to game day, because look, with all of the movement, we're going to talk about some of these teams today, with all of the transfer portal movement, coaching changes, you're going to be wrong on teams. I'm going to be wrong on teams. Everyone out there is going to be wrong or right on teams. There's going to be a lot of adjustments there's going to be a lot more adjustments that you make in this day and age than you did, say 5 years ago with all of the turnover on these teams. So yeah, there's probably going to be some differing opinions out there. We'll talk about how that impacts the market and some of the line moves out there as well. But more importantly, we'll go through all 7 of the games involving FBS teams. I don't think there's lines out for FCS game, because there's a couple FCS. I think the first official game is Western Kentucky, who lost their quarterback to the transfer portal. Speaking of the transfer portal, they're taking on Austin Peay. I think Middle Tennessee State's old quarterback is Austin Peay's quarterback now, and Western Kentucky's old running back is there. I don't know, but the lines aren't out for those games anyway, so we won't talk about them. But don't worry, FCS fans, we'll get to you later in the year. Let's dive right into it. Saturday, there's 7 games that we're going to talk about involving FBS teams, FBS versus FBS matchups. All right, let's start in Dublin, where we're taking the college football is taking the NFL approach. The NFL sends the Jags there. We're sending Northwestern football. Not the most pleasant watching experience, but Nebraska out to a 13.5 point favorite. Appear to be taking some money. Over under sitting at 49.5, 50. This game will be played 12:30 p.m. Eastern on Fox in Dublin, and it's the first. I believe it's the first international game, not including the Bahamas Bowl. The first, I guess you could say, the first college football game overseas since Stanford destroyed Rice, and they actually ran out of beer in Australia in that game. Because what else are you going to do? Watch Rice down 50 or drink all the beer in the stadium? Because that's what the Aussies did in that game. I love, one of my favorite things is looking back at the history of college football games played internationally. There used to be a lot more. I mean, there was a Coca-Cola Classic that was played in Tokyo every year from 1977 to 1993. There was a Bacardi Bowl that was a bowl game that was played in Havana, and it would be like the University of Havana or the Cuban Athletic Club playing like an SEC team. Amazing. You got to go look up some of these. The first one I ever played was McGill versus Harvard in 1869. Harvard won 3-0. McGill's trying to impersonate hockey. So there's really fun ones. I think Penn went to China and played some ambassador thing like 4 years ago, and they won 88-0 against somebody. I don't know. It's really funny. I love looking back at some of those games. But I digress. It's time to get into the real games. Nebraska 13.5 point favorites. I'm high on them. I think you're high on them. We still don't know who the Northwestern starting quarterback is. Presumably, we're looking at Ryan Helinski, who was a quarterback last year, but Pat Fitzgerald. Mum is the word, he said. He's not going to announce the starter until kick. What are your thoughts here?
Well, I got a lot of thoughts on this game, but I love Nebraska. You love Nebraska, but let's talk about a couple of things off the field before we get on the field. The Irish Times published the Irish Times published a hit piece this week on the Nebraska program. It cited the fact that one of their assistants uses homophobic slurs. It cited that Mark Whipple compared a foul to a rape while he was at UMass. And it talked about how Scott Frost's ex-girlfriend got drug out by her hair by Lawrence Phillips back in their playing days. This piece that was put out by the Irish Times has even more than that, completely offensive to the Nebraska program in general. And Frost and Whipple have been in the news saying, well, we appreciate that article. It's got us more focused. Everybody's read it. We are highly motivated for this game. I think they're going over there to make a statement if they weren't, already needing a statement after all the changes in the offseason. So I think when you handicapped week 0 and week 1, you have to ask what has changed with these programs since they last played each other. You can throw last year's blowout completely through the window, right? Adrian Martinez had 3 rushing touchdowns before the end of the first quarter. They tacked on another 4 rushing touchdowns. That's not going to be this Nebraska team. They now have a new offensive coordinator in Mark Whipple. He had Pitt finish top 10 in finishing drives. Scott Frost couldn't do that. They never finished within the top 50. They now have a new offensive line coach, Donovan Raiola. He has got to improve a rank of 125th in pass blocking. But Casey Thompson coming in from Texas, the guy is obsessed with being perfect in his reads and his throws. He was 24-9 TD to INT ratio last year, but he has a cannon for an arm. Lifetime, he has twice as many big-time throws as turnover-worthy plays and passing attempts over 20 yards. And in the 10 to 19 range, he has a 9-1 TD to INT ratio. The kid can absolutely throw. He does have blowouts. There was a Kansas game where he was terrible and he had 5 turnover-worthy plays. But for the most part, he's pretty stable and pretty good, and the cannon is there. Frost said this as he got on the plane: we're going to let it rip. Now, that doesn't sound to me like Whipple is going to be spending time pounding the rock with Ramir Johnson and Marquise Stepp. It's not going to happen. Whipple's going to want to go deep. He's got a quarterback that's got the arm that could do it. Now, when you look on the defensive side of the ball, Eric Schnander's heavy blitz, the 3-4, 68% comes back per tart, but 88% of the pressures come back. So Northwestern's going to be under whoever the quarterback is, right? They're going to be under a lot of pressure. Now, we don't know anything about Brendan Sullivan, 3-star quarterback. We don't know if he's going to start. We don't know what he's capable of. But we do know about Ryan Helinski. And the stat that I've got on Ryan Helinski is just like, it's mind-blowing. 590 career passing attempts, 7 big-time throws. How is that even possible? He had 4 completions over 20 yards last year. He had 3 interceptions over 20 yards last year. The offense is just going to be, the Northwestern offense is going to be uber dependent on running back Evan Hull. He's a 1,000-yard back. He was the 3rd highest amount of catches last year. He averages 3.6 yards after contact, and he created 50 missed tackles. But what is the one team he didn't create a missed tackle against last year? Nebraska, believe it or not. So there's not a lot of weapons on the outside. Malik Washington is back for Northwestern, but he's below 2 yards per route run. He's not explosive. This Northwestern offense scored 14 points just once in their final 7 games. The one team they did score 21 on was against Rutgers. And we're supposed to think that Mike Bahakian is like all of a sudden got this figured out with this offense. It's going in the wrong direction. So stuck for me, this Northwestern defense losing Chris Bergen is 141 tackles. Brandon Joseph transfers to Notre Dame from safety. Bottom line, Whipple is going to take shots at this secondary. Specifically, he's going to go at the safeties. But when you look at A.J. Hampton, like everyone's like, oh, these corners, Mitchell and Hampton are great corners. A.J. Hampton was great at forced interceptions. He also had one of the worst explosive play rates as a corner in all of FBS last year. I think Whipple is going at this secondary. I don't think he's going to wait till 3rd down. I think Scott Frost's words of we're going to let it rip, that's exactly what's going to happen. You see, I don't know what these 12s were. There were 12s in the market earlier in this week, Stuck. I dove in and got one of those. We're up to 13.5. I project this 16. I think it's going to end at 14.5, and then you'll get the buyback, the traders that want to get both sides of it. But tell me how Northwestern is scoring. They're going to want to keep it slow. They want to keep it bruising, but that's not Mark Whipple's game. I like the over. I don't know, key number of probably 51. You want to get it for there because it's going up as we're talking here on this podcast. But I think the best bet is Nebraska 14 or better. I think they're going for the jugular here for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, I mean, you look, the troubling thing, Northwestern's offense is never any good. I mean, they have like but we're in like the 19th year of Pat Fitzgerald's been there forever. But last year, what really took a step back was their defense. And Mike Hankwitz, who was there for 13 years, is the defense coordinator, a ton of success, left. And last year, the new defense coordinator was Jim O'Neill, and Northwestern's defense fell off a cliff. And that was the biggest problem with them last year.
You know why, right? Why were they so good in 2020 and 2018? Is because they were the number one team in the nation in havoc. You couldn't get a pass off without it being picked and ran back. That there's none of that now, Stuck. That it's all fallen off the table.
Yeah, and Jim O'Neill had a rough year, and they had allowed over 6 yards per play. They haven't allowed over 5 yards per play since I believe 2011. So defense really fell off, and I don't see it getting much better this year. And the offense we know is just dreadful. There's limited options in the passing attack. You got a good one, the good offensive lineman, a decent running back, but you got Helinski. You have the unknown at one quarterback, or Helinski, who I think will probably start like just throwing the ball at receivers' feet. Like that's the offense. So, Northwestern does have these weird bounce back years, but historically, and they overperform in some spots, and they're generally a good dog because they'll shorten the game and they'll just make their defense usually makes plays, holds teams in the red zone. But I don't see it with this defense, and I don't see it with O'Neill. So yeah, I would agree that Nebraska's the side. I haven't pulled the trigger yet, but I think it's corner nothing to start off the year. All right, let's move on. Let's come back stateside and talk Connecticut football. We're hitting all the exciting offenses. Utah State, I think this line that opened originally was over 4 touchdowns. It's down to a 26.5 point favorite. Over under down a tad to 59.5. This game will be played at 4 Eastern on FS1. Couple notes here for UConn. By the way, over the past 10 years, if you bet every single team in college football, your lowest return on investment would be betting UConn. They have a 35% against the spread rate over the past decade, the worst team you could have bet. So this year, it's Jim Mora era. Their defensive coordinator, Spanos, will not be available. They had to take a leave of absence like 10 days ago. So I don't know how that's going to impact things. And maybe the best offensive player for Connecticut, which is their star kick returner, is out with an injury. Like that was their whole offense at times last year. So you look at this UConn team. We don't know we do not know who the quarterback's going to be. They have 4 listed. 4. Taekwon Robertson, who was at Penn State, former 4-star kid, who just kind of flamed out there. You have Cale Millen, Zion Turner, Fomakan. So there's 4 guys listed. I don't know who's going to be the quarterback. Their leading rusher from last year is actually second on the depth chart. Really young team last year, so they did get some experience. They bring back a lot of production. But on the defensive side of the ball, they lost their best player, Travis Jones, a defensive tackle who went to the Ravens. Their second best defensive tackle transferred to TCU. So they're kind of thin, the defensive line. Utah State, meanwhile, had a magical year last year, really lucky in a lot of metrics and close games, but they were the surprise winner of the Mountain West. They do bring back a quarterback. We're talking a lot about a lot of teams on Saturday that have not named a quarterback battles. That's not the case with Utah State and Logan Bonner. But Utah State only returns 50% of its overall production, bottom 15 overall. They lost their top 3 receivers, their 2 best defenders, a couple of corners. They lost their edge rushers, safety Shaq Bond, who was really good, a star kick returner in Scarver, who was one of the best in the history of college football. So they lost a lot, have to replace a lot. Justin Rice as well. Then, Anthony Switzer gets hurt. The transfer was going to they were expecting big things from him on defense. So there's a lot that to replace, a lot of new pieces on this Utah State team. And They have Alabama on deck, so I don't know how that's going to impact things because remember about 2 months ago there was all that talk about all the bets coming in on Utah State to win the national title, which I don't know where they were coming from. But if Utah State has serious aspirations of winning the national title, they got to beat Alabama next week. So you got to I was trying to figure that out. Like I think Connecticut will be a little better. I want to fade this Utah State team, and they have a lot of new pieces to replace, and especially at receiver. Devin Tompkins is irreplaceable. So I wanted to fade them, and I was trying to think, okay, do I really want to bet UConn on the first day of college football? I don't even know their quarterback's going to be. They don't have their defensive coordinator. There's still a lot of uncertainty. It's still a really bad team. So I was thinking maybe I bet UConn second half. I could kind of see how they look, and then if Utah State is up, then I'm thinking, okay, Utah State has Bama on deck. Maybe they're not going to show anything. Maybe they're going to rest guys. Like, are they really good? But then, like, all right, they have a lot of new receivers. So they want to work on some things. So I keep going back and forth in that regard. I do think from a line perspective, there's value on UConn, but I'm lower than the market on Utah State. But there's a lot of uncertainty and variance with this UConn team. What do you see here with UConn football heading west to take on Utah State?
Well, my personal revenge game against Utah State is going to come on September 29th when they go on a Thursday night to BYU. So I'll just wait for them to get to that before I hammer on them. I know what I want to do in this game, and I haven't pulled the trigger yet. I probably will. So keep your eyes open on the action app. And I want to go under here for a lot of reasons. If I was projecting this game at the end of last year, I would have made it about 48. That's based on seconds per play, finishing drive, success rate. But the problem is we've had so much change and fluidity on both sides of the ball. Both teams, that you can't really trust that projection. And Stuck mentioned it. There's 4 different quarterbacks. I think we're going to see all 4 of them. The offensive the offensive coordinator defensive coordinator. Start that over, Mitchell. They have 4 different quarterbacks that I expect them to play all of them. If you look at the scrimmage reports from UConn, the offense has been a complete disappointment. None of the 4 of them have been able to generate anything during a scrimmage. And it's not like this UConn defense is all world. The offensive line lists just 7 players in the 2 deep. Injuries are a major concern, and depth is a concern on this line. Now, there are some outside weapons. Keelan Marin brings back 5 TDs. He was the team leader in catches. And then when you flip over to the defensive side of the ball, the defensive coordinator left, but Spanos also was a part of Mora's staff at UCLA a decade ago. So I think Mora is going to be, he was the DC for the 49ers for multiple seasons. So I think he's the one going to be calling the plays. I'm not sure what the loss is there, but they're kind of mediocre in FBS and 62% returning tackles, passes, defense, and pressures. But those numbers were terrible. They couldn't get to quarterbacks. They were 98th in coverage. There's no pressure.
Well, they were good against the run because they had a guy in the middle. So they were decent against runs up the middle, because they had a guy in the middle that the Ravens took in the 3rd round as a stud, and he's no longer there. That was their one kind of strength. They were decent sometimes against the run.
But I completely threw that out because they're playing Utah State, right? So Logan Bonner.
Yeah, well, they also had an NFL guy that's no longer there, which it's going to get even worse.
Yeah, so UConn, I'm just like, I want nothing to do with this offense, and I don't trust the defense. Although I will say all their secondary comes back for UConn. So at least there's experience. They know how to communicate, I guess. For Utah State, Logan Bonner comes back at quarterback. He was 6th. They were 6th in passing success rate, top 20 in explosiveness, both standard and passing downs. But the top 3 wide receivers are gone. Only Justin McGriff is back. He makes up 35 of the 43 returning catches to this team. So, but he's not explosive whatsoever. If you look at him, he wasn't like the other wide receivers. The offensive line loses half their snaps, but like we said, I'm not sure UConn can expose that. Half the tackles on the defense for Utah State, they're gone. 34 tackles for loss. They're missing between Justin Rice, Nick Henninger, and Marcus Moore. And so the strength of this Utah State team is going to be the back 7, if you want to call that a strength. So I want the under in this game because the more experience on both defenses comes in the secondary. UConn's not capable of throwing the ball at all. They're going to have 4 quarterbacks trying to run what offensive coordinator Nick Charlton calls a pro-style offense that we ran at Maine. If you dig into Maine's numbers, There's nothing flashy about this at all. He acknowledges that he's going to have to run RPO because of his 4 quarterbacks and what they're capable of doing, but he wants to run a pro style offense. And that's tough to do when quarterbacks can't grasp, that scheme. So according to the Connecticut Insider, Nick Charlton said yesterday, we have to establish the run. We have some really fast backs. If you look at their depth chart, they're all 5'10" or shorter. They all weigh 190 pounds or less. So they better be pretty fast because they're not going to get very far in between the tackles. So I have no confidence that UConn can score. And I have a little bit of PTSD with Blake Anderson, scoring as many points as possible, although I don't think that's going to happen here. And they play Bama the next week. So I want under. I don't know why I'm not playing it. I've completely broken down everything. It's going to come through the app, guys. Under, it's a 50.
All right, I'm playing it. I'm playing it too.
Let's play it.
All right, I'm in. That'll be my first, not my first play, but like the first time wise. Well, I haven't bet Nebraska yet. So yeah, that's because that game's at 4 Eastern. I'm in on it. You make a good enough case. I also think that, as I said before, I do think that Utah State is going to take their foot off the gas with Alabama on deck. And I do think that their passing attack, which is they couldn't really run the ball. They weren't effective running the ball last year. Their passing attack was absolutely electric, but Tompkins was unbelievable. And they lose their top 3 pass catchers. So I think they're going to regress in that department. So yeah, I'll join you on the under. And yeah, some people hate like these. I've seen people trashing these week 0 games. I love starting off college football like this with all of these just hilarious matchups, bad teams. It's just a great way to kick off August. So let's shall we keep it going with another one? We've hit so far. We've hit Northwestern in Dublin. And then we've came back stateside and talked Connecticut. And now we're going to move on to Wyoming and Illinois. 4 Eastern on Big Ten Network. Illinois an 11-point favorite. Over under has come down from 46 to around 44. This is two teams that just from an identity perspective, just if you look last year, they're just like, let's run the ball. The reason this total is so low and has come down, should be running clock throughout. New quarterbacks here. You have Tommy DeVito, the presumed starter for Illinois over Art Sikowski, who is horrendous. But I don't know if your boy Bielema has officially named DeVito the starter. I think he is. Like, just assume he's all taking all the QB1 reps. So you can assume he's going to start. And Andrew Peasley, again, I don't think they announced that he's officially the starter, but I would assume that he is. I think Wyoming said they're going to wait till game day. They have another couple other young options, but they lost their top 2 quarterbacks. Peasley comes in from Utah State. He was a Utah State backup. Can't really throw the ball. Has some legs. He'll fit right in with this Wyoming offense. Wyoming got absolutely gutted in the transfer portal. I mean, they lost, like I said, their top 2 quarterbacks. They lost Valladay, their top running back. They lost Isaiah Nair, their top receiver. Mama, their best defender was gone. A couple of corners transferred out. I mean, just across the board, this team was absolutely gutted by the transfer portal. Offense is going to be a struggle. They're just going to run the ball and hope their D can step up. On the other side, Illinois, it's a Bielema offense. They do have a loaded running back room led by Chase Brown. DeVito comes in at quarterback. They have to replace a few starters in the offensive line, which is a strength last year, but they're big. They brought in some transfers. They have a lot of size. It's what your typical Bielema offensive line looks like. And one of the things I think that was most impressive about Illinois last year was Ryan Walters, who I was always a big fan of. He came in and the defense really improved last year. They do lose a safety to the NFL and they return just 6 starters, but I like the foundation and I think they'll be well schooled. The offense is where there is some uncertainty because, and I don't think that you never want to get too caught up in coach speak, but the offense was pretty bad last year. The receiving options are limited. Like their best receiver was Isaiah Williams, who was used to be their quarterback, and he really athletic kid converted to wide receiver and did a good job. But they don't have a lot of pass catching options. But Bielema fired the offensive coordinator and brought in Barry Lunney from UTSA, who I think put up like 40 on Illinois last year. So Bielema was like, oh, we're hiring him. So to be the new offensive coordinator, and he did a really good job turning around UTSA's offense. He runs an offense which he calls temp pro. And so it's like a pro style offense, which is what Illinois was trying to run last year, which is basically just turn around and hand the ball, but with tempo. And UTSA would show tempo, and they want to we kind of want to spread you out horizontally. I don't know if they're like, and they've been running tempo in camp and going no huddle. So when some of the receivers are talking about how like they get too tired to do it. I don't know. So like, are they going to actually run tempo? Because that's like what his offense is called, and he's done it in the past. So it might not just be like tempo, because coaches all the time, they say, hey, we're going to go tempo. We're going to play fast. So are they actually going to try to do that? I don't know. It's a Bielema team. I would assume they're just going to hand it off, or just turn around and hand it off and play slow. But that's something to consider. I would lean Illinois here, but it's tough for me to actually. Wyoming's just absolutely gutted, but it's tough for me to lay 11, 12 with this team in a game where the total is like 44. It's tough to cover. Margins are very thin. Might end up being a stay away for me. But on the surface, I would think ugly game and lean Illinois, and Illinois wins something like 28-13. What are your thoughts here?
Well, story time from Mr. Colin Wilson. I've actually sacked Barry Lunney Jr., the new offensive coordinator for Illinois. He played at Fort Smith Southside. I played at Bentonville High School. He was the quarterback.
Wow.
His dad is an Arkansas high school legend. But yeah, my junior year at Bentonville, I did get to sack Mr. Barry Lunney Jr. He was on the Arkansas staff when
he was with Bielema for years, right?
Yeah, he was on the staff, and when he got fired, he covered against LSU, and I think that was the fall down game at the end zone. But so Barry Lunney Jr. goes down to UTSA after the new regime came into Arkansas. And so eventually Bielema gets the chance to go pluck Barry Lunney Jr. Now he's up there, but it's going to be in the mold of what Bielema wants to run this offense, which is a big bruising between the tackles runs. And when you said big stuck, like last year, Bielema was really not happy with his offensive line production in the 2D because none of them were his guys. Now they've got massive size. Everybody's over 300 pounds. Zy Chrysler, he lists at 360. And so I say that because like the Wyoming defensive line, like nobody's above like 285, 290. And I just don't think that this is a scenario where, Wyoming's not going to be able to put up any resistance in between the tackles, but it's going to be a vanilla game plan. With Indiana coming next week, you're not going to see the typical Bielema trick play, the throw to the third tackle on the field. You're not going to see a lot of pulling guards and trap plays. You're not going to have anything on tape. So the question is can Wyoming just flat out line up and tackle? And I'm not sure. I think there's going to be tons of highlight yards for the running backs for Illinois here. And Wyoming, I mean, like we said on the win total, the futures podcast, those poor guys, they just farmed out their entire squad to everybody else out in the FBS. And besides nose and defensive tackle, the defense is a complete reset. Not really sure it's a bad thing. They were 115th in Havoc last year, and their special teams last year was 125th in SP plus. So this is a really bad matchup. So Illinois is going to cover if Brett Bielema wants to cover, but this is going to be vanilla with Indiana on deck. You're not going to see those crazy special teams and throw into offensive lineman shit that Bielema does in certain games. He's saving all that for Indiana. So I project this game at 10.5. I'm not playing on the side. From a total perspective, I think it's come down too far, but you have to ask yourself, like, how is Wyoming going to score? I'd be shocked if they got 14 points in this game. So I should play the over as far as it keeps sinking down. But for me, this is going to be a live play all the way. I'm going to wait.
Don't play the over. Don't play the over.
Oh, here we go. Yeah, don't play the over. Well, I'm just going to
don't play this over. You're going to be you'll probably end up have a good chance to get a better number. You will be kicking yourself midway through the second quarter when it's 0-0, which this game has a chance to be like after one. Yeah, ugly game. Make sure you monitor. But I agree with you with the vanilla game plan and not showing too much. It makes a ton of sense. Make sure you follow along on the Action Network app to see if we do indeed play anything live. Maybe it'll be a classic Colin getting warmed up for San Diego State games. You see a live over 18.5 come through on the app for that game. An ugly one.
The live over 18.5. I love it.
All right, let's move on to. I'm really excited about the night games. These are my hottest takes, and there's some exciting games. And it's not just. Well, look, here's the one we'll start with: Charlotte at Florida Atlantic. We have a conference game too. Florida Atlantic 7.5 point favorites over under 59.5. This game 7 p.m. Eastern on CBS Sports Network. This is the game of the day, in my opinion. And look at the total compared to some of the games we talked about. It's up there. There should be some points in this game.
Moving as we speak.
Yeah. But I think there was some groups fighting over this early in the week, and last week it was at like 56, up to 59, back to 56, back up. And last year, for what it's worth, Florida Atlantic went into Charlotte and absolutely drilled the 49ers. They won, I think, 38-7. Charlotte was actually up at the half, and then nothing went right in the second half, all kinds of turnovers. I actually love Charlotte here. And it's scary because the Charlotte defense last year was one of the worst in the country. And if you look at yards per attempt, they were second worst in the country. Yards per completion, 15 yards per completion, second worst in the country. There is nothing they did well in defense. Their defense was so bad. But they bring in Greg Brown, who has 40 years of experience, who everything that I've been reading and hearing, it's not just like our defense is going to be good, but he's simplifying everything. And they brought in, they do have two really good defensive ends now. Watts is their best player at defensive end, and they bring in Sadiq from Central Michigan as the other bookend defensive end. And there's actually some talent compared to the output. Like the output has been like UMass, UConn. There's more talent on this defense than they've shown. I'm not calling this a good defense, but there's only one way to go up, and they blew this thing up with a whole new staff. It cannot get any worse. There's some upside here with the Charlotte defense. Meanwhile, the Florida Atlantic offense should be pretty explosive. RPO attack. Brett Dearman is a new offense coordinator. Brett Dearman literally wrote the book on RPOs, but they were already running a lot of RPOs from with N'Kosi Perry. Brings back his top two receivers, top two backs. Johnny Ford, really explosive in the running and also out of the backfield in the receiving game. So their offense could be explosive, but inefficient. So I think that, I don't know, the simplified attack, they face an RPO offense in practice. They have all summer to prepare for this game. I think the Charlotte defense is going to get torched, but it'll be better than maybe some expect. Where I think Charlotte has a really big advantage in this game is on the other side of the ball. And Charlotte arguably has the best receiver group of any group of five team. With, first of all, they bring back 6-year starter at quarterback and Chris Reynolds, who has some pro aspirations. But their receiving core, Victor Tucker, former Biletnikoff finalist in 2020, Grant Dubose, who's a Biletnikoff finalist this year, preseason semifinalist, and Elijah Spencer, who was the freshman of the year in the conference last year. They have, returned a lot of experience on the offensive line. Where theirs is a pass-first offense, I think that they have a major, major advantage on the outside against this Florida Atlantic secondary that lost everybody except Young at safety, who's a good player, but they lost all of their corners. I mean, you're talking they're going to be starting three freshmen in the secondary and another guy who doesn't really have that much experience. There is not a lot of playing experience here. There's not a lot of size. Charlotte has big receivers and go up and get the ball. Last year, that was the strength of Florida Atlantic. Good secondary. They could, really get a lot of turnovers for us, so there could be some regression. But they also had a kid Gilbert in the secondary. That's not with the Giants, but they lost everybody in that secondary except for Young. I think their corners are going to get torched here. And why is that going to happen? Who's the new defensive coordinator for Florida Atlantic? I hated this move. Todd Orlando. What does Todd Orlando want to do? Just ask. You can ask Texas fans. You can ask US. He wants to blitz, and he wants to leave his corners out on islands. A lot of people in Texas remember the game against Joe Burrow and LSU early in the year. 3rd and 17. I actually didn't disagree with that because you needed to also maybe get him out of field goal range. 3rd and 17 from the 43. Blitzes both safeties, and Jamar Chase burns them. Game over with like 3 minutes to go. But his MO is, okay, we're going to stop the run and bring pressure on 3rd downs and leave our corners out on islands, no matter where he goes, no matter what team he has. Well, Charlotte can't really run the ball. And I don't really like the personnel fit up front for, Florida Atlantic has some returning pieces that are interesting up on the front seven, but I don't really like the fit for Orlando's system, but that's how he's going to play this. And I think that Charlotte is going to be able, their receivers are going to have a field day here. Tucker, Dubose in particular, against this really young, short, inexperienced corner group against one of the best receiver rooms in the country. So I think that Charlotte's going to be able to move the ball at will against Florida Atlantic defense that was really lucky last year. And if you look at points per opportunity and the red zone, they would kind of bend and don't break. They would get a lot of turnovers. I don't see that happening with this secondary and this scheme. Give me Charlotte here. I'm taking the 7.5. I'm glad that it went back up from 7. It's scary because their defense could just get absolutely gutted, but I'm trusting my read on this one. What are your thoughts here?
Well, I think you made a case for me to take the over, which I did in the app right before we started podcasting. N'Kosi Perry's coming back at quarterback. He gets 72% of his receiving yards back. Specifically, he gets LeJohntay Wester, and Lester never had a catch go beyond 40 yards. So we'll see what he can do from an explosive perspective. But N'Kosi Perry is going to be protected. The offensive line returns 87% of their snaps. Perry had his best season last year. I mean, God, we're covering the gambit here. We've done Wyoming, we've done UConn. Now we're talking N'Kosi Perry. So he went 20-7 and TD to INT last year. He still had those fumbles. He had 12 fumbles last year. And he has a complete drop in efficiency when there's pressure, but the offensive line is experienced here. And the, Florida Atlantic, to your point, I mean, they're flushed with defense names on defense that are from the transfer portal. So we don't know exactly what we're going to get. Now you flip over to the Charlotte side, right? Less than 57% of their pressures and their tackles come back. N'Kosi Perry should be in a clean pocket. 4 of the top 6 tacklers are gone. And those players that are there, they don't return a lot of havoc whatsoever. So, I mean, and in this game last year, they produced 1 sack on N'Kosi Perry. So, Chris Reynolds has been with this team since, I think the dawn of college football. He had his best passing season last year. And, with all this portal names on FAU, I think this is going to be a score fest. I think it's going to be in the air. I think it's going to be a lot of points. Taggart's going to want to go really fast. Charlotte typically outside the top 100 in seconds per play. Florida Atlantic was 27th last year. So if you can get them sped up and keep going, then Charlotte's going to have to respond. And I think that's reason why this number, I think, is a little bit higher than it should be. I think it should be around 55, but I'm still taking the over on this because I think it's just going to be a score fest.
Yeah, good chance you can get a backdoor here too from Charlotte. I think their offense is going to have a lot of success the way that these two schemes kind of match up and how this game's going to play out. And they have massive advantages on the outside with their receivers who are really good against an extremely inexperienced group of corners. And I think Charlotte keeps pace. Wouldn't be shocked if Club Lit gets out with an upset. All right, let's move on to UTEP, and again, it's sold out here. UTEP Minor Nation in their season and conference opener, taking on North Texas. This has been right around a pick. I still think it's a pick. Over under sitting at 54 and a half. Last year, these two teams met during the regular season, and North Texas won 20-17 on a field goal as time expired. I'll give you my quick take on this. I think that the North Texas defense, it started, the big fan of the hire, Phil Bennett, they started to improve at the end of last year. They also started to play a little slower, leaning on that run game a lot more. UTEP, I actually like some of their pieces on their defense, but these are two run first offenses. Clock should be moving here. I like the under, by the way, if you can tell where I'm going with this. The total when they played last year, you saw the game ended 20-17, was 55. I played 55, under 55.5 this year. And I'll tell you why. And they played earlier in the season before, you saw any improvement from the North Texas defense. Bennett's now had time to, implement some more complexity to his schemes, and it's a second year in those schemes. But what do we, these two teams want to run. They're going to be inefficient quarterback play. There's going to be, their turnover numbers are not good for Austin Awney and Hardison. And, when you just hope the turnovers aren't in territory. But when you look at this UTEP team, what have we always talked about with their offense, right? It was, all right, inefficient to start, like early downs, just running. And I think that's where North Texas will be okay defending the run. But they were all about explosives, right? The UTEP offense has always been about, you would always talk about, okay, look at the success rate versus the explosiveness, right? And UTEP was always up there in explosiveness. And if you look at that game versus North Texas, that was exactly how it played out. Guess who went completely bananas for UTEP? You have a guess?
Jacob Cowing.
Yeah. Well, he had an 80-yard touchdown. He had 5 catches for 175 yards and a touchdown. That he was everything to the UTEP passing attack and the explosiveness that they had. And now he's no longer there. And this, I get this total of 55.5. I just don't think that the offense is going to be as explosive. I think North Texas's defense. Now, look, North Texas wants to play fast, but they started to slow it down at the end of last year, relying more on their run game. I think their defense is a bit improved. UTEP does not want to play fast, so there's clash of paces here. They play extremely slow. They also want to lean on their run game. And Cowing's no longer on the outside, which I think really sucks out that explosiveness. You usually don't have a guy like that at a program like UTEP. Not going to replace him overnight. He was just so important. Just a guy you could just throw the ball up to, and there's 80-yard touchdown, which is what happened in this game last year. So I like the under. It's also an early season conference game. I think that you're going to get some tight play, conservative play calling early. Game should be competitive. Give me the under, especially if you can get 55 or above, which is obviously a key number. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, 100% agree. So I'll just be short. I mean, that third quarter INT by Gavin Hardison last year was the difference in the ball game that finished 2017. And that Jacob Cowing's not there, 174 yards. He was the biggest factor in that game. Running back Ronald Awat was there. He had 85 yards and a TD. So I expect a lot of that out of UTEP. But I mean, everybody needs to realize what UTEP was last year. Dana Dimmel wants to run. And then we got behind schedule. We're in a passing down. And guess what? UTEP was the number 1 team in the nation in explosiveness in passing downs. That was Gavin Hardison and Jacob Cowing getting behind everybody. Well, that combination isn't there anymore. So I expect a lot more punts out of UTEP this year. And we'll see if the running game can be as efficient and keep them in standard downs. And I'm not sure that's going to happen. So with UNT, they're still top 10 in tempo, but they've kind of changed. They're 69% run now. That's sort of a change from Seth Luttrell, where it was, a lot of passing going on, a lot of dink and dunk short passing going on years ago. Now it's all rush. This team finished, and then on the defensive side, this team finished second in the nation in pass rush. So the defensive line gets cleared out. That's gone, and now the secondary becomes the experience. So when you look at Gavin Hardison trying to throw for UTEP, he's throwing into a very experienced secondary for North Texas. They do need work. They finished 106th in coverage last year, but again, Jacob Cowing is not there. So we're going to see what they're going to be able to do offensively. So I expect UTEP. They're going to go ground and pound, long sustained drives. Don't know how they're going to do in the red zone. They're going to go against a new North Texas defensive front. So I think there's going to be success up until they get into scoring position. But I think a lot of passing downs are going to equal punts. I'm with you 100% here on the under. I think it's at 54.5. I think, key at 55, key at 51. I think this is going to continue to go down. So we'll see how this goes. But without Cowing and the fact that North Texas wants to run the ball a lot, which UTEP should be able to defend, another low scoring affair.
Yep, I agree. All right, let's move on to the final game of the night. And I'm sorry, we have two left. Nevada, let's move on to, let me say that again, Mitchell, take that out. All right, let's move on to the two late night games we have left. Nevada at New Mexico State. Nevada's down to a 9-point favorite, over under down to about 50. This game is ugly. Nevada's kind of in the same boat as Wyoming, but even worse. They got absolutely crushed in the transfer portal. Their entire staff is gone. I mean, like 66 of the 110 guys in camp were not on the team last year. They only had 6 returning starters projected. One of them, all conference honors, guard, got hurt. Is probably out for the year. Another safety, hurt, not available for this game. So their only returning starters are their running back, which is their weakest part of their game, and Tala. That's it on offense. That is it. And this is a team, by the way, that has, we still don't know who their quarterback's going to be. And they want to run like RPOs, but they don't really have a mobile quarterback. You got an Oak State transfer and a guy who's like 6'9". And on defense, their only returning starters, Dom Peterson is a good defensive lineman. They're starting like 3 or 4 former Oregon walk-on transfers. And the only other starters besides that, you got Dom Peterson and Tao. That's it. And then your safety, who's one of your better players, is moving to nickel. I don't know why. It makes no sense to me. And then you're moving a corner to safety. So, like, really only have 2 guys back on the whole team that played at their position last year. It's ugly in Nevada. They're going to be terrible. The market's been fading them across the board in every possible way. Week 0, week 1, win total. And then New Mexico State, we still don't know who their quarterback is going to be. Jerry Kill comes in. Jerry killed the clock. I think that I love this under, by the way. I put under 55, which I thought was outrageous. I would still play under 50. I don't know. Nevada's offense is going to be terrible, and their defense is in better shape, at least, than their offense. And New Mexico State is not going to light the scoreboard up. Both teams, I think, are going to rely on their run game. It's going to be this clock's going to be moving throughout. And New Mexico State, I assume their quarterback is going to be this kid Pavia, he won the national title, JUCO national title, like New Mexico Military Institute, I think. Running offense. I mean, I think his season high in passing are just 215. He smart with the ball. I think 1 interception and 215 pass attempts. So it's Jerry Kill. The defense has been way ahead of the offense. I think they brought in a couple of good transfers. They have a couple of really good linebackers transitioning to a new defensive scheme here. But from everything that I've heard in camp, the defense is way ahead of the offense, which makes sense. You got 9 starters back and you bring in a couple of good transfers. So I think the New Mexico State defense will be able to hold its own against whatever this Nevada offense is going to be. Both offenses are going to be extremely run heavy. And by the way, that's New Mexico State's strength on their offense is their backfield, and they have a running quarterback. And that's what they're going to lean on. It's Jerry Kill. They're going to probably play really slow, shortened games this year. Lean on the TCU transfer, former 4-star in the backfield. So, yeah, I think that this game is ugly, low scoring. Wouldn't be shocked if New Mexico State won outright. I think they're close to getting a sellout here for their opener in the Jerry Kill era, who's generally very conservative as well. So I think conservative coach, conservative quarterback won't make mistakes, which is good here because you want this game to just like stay ugly and low scoring. A lot of uncertainty with Nevada, but I think that they're not going to come out here and play fast, and their receiving options are very limited. I mean, you lose star power all over. So this is under for me. This is New Mexico State. I have really good numbers here. I mean, I have plus 11.5 or plus 12.5 and under 55. Obviously, we've crossed a bunch of key numbers. I would still take the under. I would still take New Mexico State for small. What are you seeing here?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the same boat. I've got 13, 12, and 11, and I stopped buying at 11. Now we're at 9. I think we've exhausted our feelings about Nevada over multiple podcasts in the preseason. That win total where we were hitting at 5 on the under, I believe it's listed at 3.5 in a lot of shops right now. I think everybody's finally caught on to what's going on here with the 2 deep having non-scholarship players. Scheme change on both sides of the ball. We're not going to be pass happy. We're not going to be run heavy. And you don't have the horses to pull that off. So there's a lot of questions at Nevada going on here, and they're going to try to get this together to go on the road to Las Cruces and get this win against Jerry Kill. And Jerry Kill's a really good coach. I mean, the owner, I don't think he's been fired. I think he's only left jobs because of medical reasons, right? But, if he's on the field, that's a huge coaching advantage. So I echo everything that you say. I think the one bit of advice, because if anybody's following all of us on the Action app, you should have had this number a long time ago. If not, go ahead, hop in, get the 9. I'd play it for less. But if you don't have a piece of this, I guess the one piece of gambling advice that I can give you is that I don't think this number is going to sit at 9. Either somebody
and you're in a dead zone, so you can wait.
You're in a dead zone. There's no sense to wait. If you see this thing trail down to 7 or 7.5, there's going to be real money that would push it across 7. I would immediately pivot to week 1 and get in on Texas State. I think that's a number that's also gone from like 6 to 4.5. I think you'd want to lay some Texas State money line. I think you'd want to lay some Texas State above +3 because this Nevada team may be worse than what we're expecting.
Yeah, so, and if they lose this game outright, that number is going to there's going to be major adjustments.
Yeah, Spavital will be favored. So that's all I can say is like, if you see this number cross 7, go to week 1 and hit Texas State.
Yep. Yeah, and historically, teams playing their first game against teams that already played have actually had a lot of success in week 1 against teams that played in week 0. I'll have an article out about that on actionnetwork.com. Also, check out my Mac manifesto. Yeah, we're in complete agreements here. All right, let's move on to the final game of the night, the game that every degenerate in the country will find a way to bet somehow. It's the first late night game. Vanderbilt at Hawaii, SEC team traveling out to the Big Island, up to an 8-point favorite. I think this game opened at a pick. Total is moving. I think it sits at, I don't even know right now. It's moving while we've been recording, 53.5. I'll have to pull it up. But stop me if you heard this before, but Hawaii lists 3 different quarterbacks as potential starters for Saturday. Joey Yellen, the Pitt transfer. Cameron Cooper was at Washington State before. Braden Traeger, who was a backup here. All have kind of different skill sets. Timmy Chang has taken over. You're going to see the run and shoot. It'll be interesting to see. I think they might actually get a bunch of them might get reps, but we'll see. Hawaii gutted by the transfer portal. Obviously, all of that drama with Todd Graham. They had a Cordero, their quarterback, left, their top running back, top receiver, defense, secondary, across the board, gutted. Complete rebuild here. Vanderbilt, meanwhile, went with Mike Wright as their starting quarterback, more of a mobile guy than a passer, prone to mistakes throwing the ball at times. It was very interesting what has happened to Ken Seals, who showed promise as a freshman. He's now listed at 3 on the depth chart. Their second string quarterback is a true freshman with a rocket arm. So it'd be interesting to see what happens if like Wright is struggling throwing the ball and they were like behind. Who are they going to bring in the true freshman and not Seals? It was very bizarre that Seals is not even 2 on the depth chart. Anyway, I digress. Anthony Orji, one of Vanderbilt's best players, will play. He was dealing with some ligament stuff, but he practiced and he's good to go. That's important. He's one of 4 returning linebackers in college football with 90 tackles and 10 tackles for loss last year. All SEC guy. He will play for Vandy. So this game, by the way, you're going to see this stat a million times if you're on Twitter and follow like any gambling accounts. Hawaii's 11-1 against the spread in its last 12 home openers. Here's the thing with those trends. By the way, I could counter that with a trend that Vanderbilt is the most successful against the spread team in the first half over the past 12 years, for whatever that's worth, in their first game of the season. But if you look back from Hawaii, one of the biggest myths in gambling that you always hear, like a casual recreational bettor says, like, bet Hawaii on the island. But if you look since 2010, now it would make sense kind of. It's like, oh, you got to travel all the way out to Hawaii, but it's not how it played out. Now it all goes back to that kind of just makes sense in people's heads. And I think I even overrate, like from a numbers perspective, the Hawaii home field advantage based on all their results. I mean, this team since 2010 has been like 35% against the spread at home. It all goes back to 2010 on like the forums when they went undefeated against the spread at home. I think they were 8-7-0. And then everyone was just like, the Hawaii game, you just bet Hawaii, it's free money late. It was a weekly thing. And then it just caught on. And then it makes sense to people without even going and looking. But it's actually, over the past 15 years, been extremely overvalued in the market. So this Hawaii 11-1 against the spread in their home opener, I don't care about that unless there's a reasoning. Like, you got to give me, correlation without causation. Like, you have to give me a reason for it. Why would that be? I would think it would be less advantageous to be playing Hawaii because the team has time to prepare and travel and get out there. So without a reason, I don't care about a 12-game sample size. This line is, out to 8. Is there going to be some buyback? I really don't know what you're going to get from Hawaii. Do I really trust Vandy to cover 8? I don't know. We'll see how much Tito's I have and if I can convince myself to bet Hawaii at some point. I don't know. I don't have a strong take on this game. Thoughts?
Yeah, I actually have a ton of thoughts on this game. I had a full write-up. It'll be at Action Network. So go make sure and go read it. I'll make sure and tweet it out a couple hours for the game. So all of us are getting blackout drunk, waiting for the Hawaii Chaser game. We'll have some material that we can read, but at a very high level, this Hawaii offense is a cluster. So Timmy Chang goes and grabs Ian Shoemaker as his offensive coordinator. Ian Shoemaker comes in from Eastern Washington, where they ran a very quick up-tempo RPO and scored a ton of points all the years that he was there. He left the program at Eastern Washington like 2 games before the season was over, claimed there was just, some differences between him and I think the head coach. So we'll see what happens there. But there's a philosophical difference between what Timmy Chang wants and what Ian Shoemaker wants. So Shoemaker wants to run the RPO from Eastern Washington. Chang wants to run the run and shoot, right? That's Hawaii football, run and shoot. But if you know anything about schematics, you can't run an RPO and a run and shoot. It just doesn't happen. But they're both saying there's a hybrid RPO run and shoot. Someone's going to have to draw that on a board for me. I don't even know what that looks like. There's no such thing. So we'll see what that looks like. The quarterback, you're right. We don't know if we're going to get Braden Shager. That's not going to move a point spread any if it is. Maybe, in the opposite direction. But, the defense at least has a little bit of familiarity because Jacob Yoro has been with the program forever. He gets promoted up. He served various roles under Graham and Rolovich, so he gets moved up. But they don't have anything coming back. They got less than 30% of their pressures or tackles or passes defensed. So everything with this Hawaii team, offense and defense, it's not bettable. Like, it's not something you can trust. Now, the last thing I'll say about it is I'm glad we're going to see Dior Scott from Last Chance U. He was in Oakland in that last year that they were on Netflix. So it'll be good to see Dior Scott get some playing time after seeing him live in his car and work at Wingstop when he was on Last Chance U. But, I think this is a Vanderbilt or nothing, and I would still play Vanderbilt at 8. I played Vanderbilt at 6.5. No one cares. That number's not there. I would still play it at 8. And the reason is, there's a lot of things. I mean, in the trench, they should absolutely dominate Hawaii. There's a size difference. There's a skill level difference. There's a recruiting difference. And when you look at that, the numbers are not pretty. You can point out a lot of warts on Vanderbilt. You look at some of the games they played last year. I think the scoring difference was like 149-7 against Miss State, Georgia, and Florida last year. I mean, there are some really, really bad numbers, and that came against an SEC schedule. It was Clark Lee's first year. He's trying to teach the 4-2-5. But go and look at that Colorado State game, right? What was that, like game 2 for Vanderbilt? They allowed just 21 points to a competent Mountain West offense, and they were able to control the trench, and they were able to win that game. I know they lost East Tennessee the week before, but
they lost to East Tennessee State 23-3 in their opener.
I know that one. Clark Lee came out after that game and said, I don't care what the final score says. We're just going to play the way that we want to play, right? So he's just like bullheaded in the fact that if it doesn't work, I'm going to keep pounding in my players to make sure they run this. All right, we're in year 2.
You also remember October 2nd at home against UConn. They barely won that game, 30-28 at home against UConn.
Right, but against,
I don't know. You're awful confident laying over a touchdown. I would not.
No, I'm confident in the fact that the players that are in the trenches for both Vanderbilt on offense and defense are better than what Hawaii has. And
sure, say they were also against UConn and East Tennessee State.
Yeah, okay, but that was like
that was playing devil's advocate.
That was new coach, new schemes, game 1, game 2, game 3, right? And then further on for the schedule. But listen, this is year 2. There shouldn't be any communication issues between the quarterbacks and the offensive line, the players and the schemes that they want to go. The defense should be much improved with a 4-2-5. I mean, until we get to SEC play, right? And the reason why Wright's the quarterback is because what he can do with his legs. If Hawaii's able to generate any pressure whatsoever, which I don't think they'll be able to, Wright can take off and go wherever he wants. This Hawaii defense is just not going to force any takeaways whatsoever. And I think Vanderbilt has what it takes from a running back perspective, from a defensive perspective. They're just going to be able to dominate on both sides of the ball. And I'm not worried about the travel. They've been there. I think they flew out Monday night. They're doing community service in Hawaii. Like none of that's going on. Like, I'm not worried about
Sunday.
Yeah. I'm getting my flights. We got, teams going to Ireland, teams going to Hawaii. But, they're out there doing community service. I'm not worried about the time difference. I'm not worried about the heat because it's actually hotter in Nashville over the last 2 months than it's been in Hawaii. And people are free. People cannot believe that the home field advantage piece that I put out every year, it's based upon against the spread, what you've done over a 3 and 10 year sample. And Hawaii's home field advantage is 0. They are so overrated at home all the time. Like people just buy into this shit because they're on the island, but they have no advantage whatsoever. So look, Hawaii can't figure out what they want to do on offense. They can't figure out a quarterback. They have no one coming back on the offensive line. They have no skill positions. And they have a disagreement between the offensive coordinator and the head coach about what kind of scheme they want to run. I think this is a huge, we don't know what we want to do for first, second quarter. In the action app, I put in under 27. That number kind of trickled down to 26.5 at a couple books. Vanderbilt is, they're slow. They're methodical. I don't think they're going to be flashy and have explosive plays. But Hawaii, how are they going to score points when they don't even know what they want to run or who's going to run it? So they might figure it out in the third quarter. There may be some points come in at the end. Could get a little wonky, But for me, this is Vanderbilt. I play it for less at 8. This is an under in the first half. Check the app for live betting because, all of us want to get on this. But that's where I'm at. I mean, there's just stuff. There's too much of a talent difference. Right. And I mean, this is a year coach versus a year.
But their line's also gone up a lot. I don't know. I might be against the world. I haven't seen anyone on Hawaii yet, which is surprising. We'll see. Maybe I'll be on the island with Hawaii. Sorry, no, but it would be a guest game, and just me thinking that the Vandy pulling a Vandy would be nothing big. All right. Great stuff going through all 7 games. Before we get out of here, let's go 3 and out. It'll be 1 minute here total.
Yeah.
Since we hit all the games, just one sentence. Your favorite side as of right now on Saturday. I'll start. It's New Mexico State. Just fade this Nevada team.
Yeah. Nebraska. Not even. I mean, for me, I think it's going to be a hammer.
Favorite total on Saturday. It's Nevada under has moved through key numbers. I still like it, but it's moved too much for me to say that's my favorite. So I'm going to go with the UTEP North Texas under. I think it's a competitive game. Will be conservatively played. 2 teams that want to run the ball, inefficient quarterback play. North Texas generally wants to play fast, but played slower at the end of last year, relied more on their rushing attack. We saw improvement from their defense under Phil Bennett. I think that'll continue in year 2. And that UTEP explosive offense, which is what they were last year, explosive passing offense, now doesn't have Cowling, who had 174 yards and a touchdown, 80-yard touchdown in this matchup last year, in which North Texas won 20-17. That total was 55. This I got under 55.5 without Cowling. I think it will play slower. North Texas defense will continue to improve, and I like some of the pieces on the UTEP D. So I'll take that under. How about you?
Yeah, instead of going for Nebraska Northwestern over, which I like, which I played, I have money on, and I've got it in the app. Once it's released, I want Nebraska team total over. Scott Frost making comments that we're going to let it rip. Mark Whipple is the new offensive coordinator. They are absolutely going to attack a Northwestern secondary that lost a star player at safety and has corners that give up explosive plays. Because of what this Nebraska team has gone through over the last couple of years, because of athletic director Trev Alberts putting the pressure on this team, and because the Irish Times has taken personal shots at Whipple and Frost, they're not going to take their foot off the pedal here. And you know what? Casey Thompson's got a lot to prove too. I like the Nebraska team total over better than I probably like anything else on the board.
All right, and then third down. Let's get the people excited. And you didn't go. You went the whole podcast without mentioning them. You mentioned your high school days there. Let's get a. Can we get a good woo pig suey from you?
Oh man, I got another week to practice. Woo pig suey. There you go. How's that?
There you go, Arkansas fans. Get excited next week for hopefully an Arkansas win between 1 and 7. I saw the money on City. We'll talk about that next week. We'll be back next week with a loaded episode to talk week 1. Make sure you subscribe, unsubscribe, subscribe, leave a review. By the way, producer Matt Mitchell, you guys killed it with some reviews. Well, here's some giveaways. List off the people that should contact you. Appreciate all you listening. Those reviews really help us out. If you've already left a review, grab someone else's phone and do it. Girlfriends, friends, I don't care. But appreciate you listening. And we'll be back next week with the week 1 betting preview. Can't wait. Good luck this weekend. Enjoy the games. We are back. Catch y'all later. Cheers.
Peace out.